The next few days were a whirlwind for Marcus. After his conversation with Emily and Jonathan, he found himself thinking constantly about their offer. A higher salary, a more prestigious job, and a chance to change the direction of his life. It was a dream come true. But it also felt overwhelming. He wasn't someone who easily accepted help from others. Marcus had always believed that hard work and determination were the keys to success. But now, with this unexpected opportunity staring him in the face, he wasn't sure what to do. Could he accept such an offer without feeling like he was taking advantage of their kindness? That evening, Marcus sat down with his wife, Sheila, at their kitchen table. His mind was still spinning from everything that had happened. Sheila looked up from her cup of tea, her eyes full of concern. "What's going on, Marcus?" she asked, sensing the tension in his voice. He let out a sigh and leaned back in his chair. "Emily and Jonathan made me an offer. They want me to come work for them, managing the security for their properties. The pay is much higher than what I make now." Sheila's eyes widened in surprise. "That sounds like a great opportunity, Marcus. Why are you hesitating?" Marcus rubbed his forehead, trying to organize his thoughts. "It's just too much. I've never expected anything like this. I don't want to feel like I'm taking advantage of their generosity." Sheila smiled gently and reached across the table to take his hand. "Marcus, they'd want to help you. They see something in you that you might not even see in yourself. You've worked hard all these years. You've been a good man, a good husband, and a good father. This is your chance to take that next step. Don't let fear hold you back." Marcus listened carefully to Sheila's words. She was right. He had worked hard all his life, and it had never been easy. Maybe it was time to stop worrying about the past and start looking forward to what could be a brighter future. "I'm just not sure," Marcus said, shaking his head. "I've always been content with what I have. But this offer, it's life-changing. I don't know if I deserve it." "You do," Sheila said softly. "You've earned it, and if you don't take this chance, you might never know what could have been." Marcus sat in silence for a moment, deep in thought. It was clear that Sheila was right. This was an opportunity he couldn't ignore. It wasn't just about the money or the job. It was about building a better future for their family. A chance to finally get ahead. The next morning, Marcus made his decision. He called Jonathan and Emily, his hand shaking a little as he dialed the number. When Jonathan answered, Marcus spoke with more confidence than he felt. "Jonathan, Emily, I've thought it over, and I'd be honored to accept your offer. I want to work for you, help you with your security, and be a part of the team." There was a pause on the other end of the line before Jonathan's voice came through, filled with warmth. "Marcus, that's great news. We're thrilled. You won't regret this decision. We're looking forward to working with you." As Marcus hung up the phone, a sense of relief washed over him. He had made the right choice. This was the beginning of something new, something better. And no matter where it took him, Marcus knew that he would always stay true to who he was, someone who helped others, no matter the cost. That afternoon, he told Sheila the news. She smiled brightly, wrapping her arms around him. "I'm so proud of you, Marcus." Marcus smiled back, his heart full. "This is just the beginning, Sheila. We're going to make the most of it." And with that, Marcus knew that the future was full of possibilities. Marcus helped Emily inside the building, leading her to a small, quiet security room. The warm light and the comfortable chairs helped her relax a little, but her hands were still trembling. Her face was pale, and she had a far-off look in her eyes, like she was still trying to process what had just happened. "Take a seat, Mom," Marcus said gently, offering her the only chair in the room. "I'll call you a tow truck, but first, you need to rest. You've been through a lot." Emily sat down, but her body was stiff, as if she didn't feel fully safe yet. "Thank you," she whispered, glancing up at Marcus. "I don't know what would have happened if you hadn't come." Marcus smiled softly. "It's my job to keep people safe. Don't worry about it. Just focus on catching your breath." He reached for his radio, trying to contact a tow truck to get her car sorted out. However, as he picked it up, he noticed Emily's face changing. She was clutching her stomach now, and her breathing had become more shallow. "Ma'am, are you okay?" Marcus asked, concern filling his voice. Emily gasped, her hand pressing harder against her belly. I think I'm having contractions," she said weakly. I wasn't due for another 2 weeks." Marcus didn't hesitate. He immediately dropped the radio and knelt beside her. "I'll get you to the hospital," he said with firm certainty, trying to keep her calm. He knew this was important. Emily shook her head, her eyes wide with fear. I can't drive, and the hospital is far. I need to make it there, but I don't know if I can." Her voice cracked as she spoke. Marcus looked at her for a moment, trying to think fast. It was late, and the roads were wet and dangerous. He could feel the weight of the situation pressing on him. Emily wasn't just any person he'd helped. She was carrying a child, and he couldn't let anything happen to her. "Don't worry," Marcus said, standing up. "I'll drive you. Let's go. I'll get you to the hospital safe and sound, no matter what." Emily hesitated for just a second, unsure of whether to trust him. But she could see the sincerity in Marcus's eyes. She had no other option. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice full of gratitude. "I don't know what I would do without you." Marcus helped her stand, steadying her when she wobbled. As they walked outside together, he noticed the heavy rain had turned into a downpour. But he didn't care. His car was parked just a few steps away. "We'll make it, I promise," Marcus said, unlocking his car. Emily climbed into the passenger seat, her breath shaky. Marcus closed the door behind her, walking around to the driver's side. He could see the worry in her eyes, but he was determined to get her to the hospital in time. As Marcus started the engine, the rain pounded harder against the windows, but he drove steadily through the streets, focused on Emily's well-being. He could feel the weight of the responsibility on his shoulders, but he knew he had to stay calm, for her sake. Emily breathed deeply, her hands pressed to her stomach, as the car moved smoothly through the wet streets. Despite her fear, she began to relax a little, trusting Marcus. She wasn't alone anymore. For the first time that night, Emily allowed herself to close her eyes, knowing she would be okay. Marcus Jenkins had always been known for his calm and steady presence. At 6 feet tall, with broad shoulders and a reassuring voice, he was someone people trusted immediately. He worked as a security guard at an office building downtown, a job that didn't pay much but kept food on the table and a roof over his family's head. Marcus had a wife, Sheila, and 2 kids, Maya and David, whom he adored. His life was simple, but he never complained. Every day, Marcus woke up at 5:30 a.m., made himself a cup of coffee, and headed out the door before sunrise. He liked the quiet mornings, the stillness of the streets before the city came alive. At work, his coworkers often joked about his punctuality, but Marcus took his job seriously. "It's not just a paycheck," he would say. "It's about making sure people feel safe." On this particular evening, Marcus was asked to cover a late shift. It was stormy outside, with rain pouring down in heavy sheets. His supervisor, Mr. Grayson, had called him earlier in the day. "Marcus, we're short-staffed tonight. Can you stay late?" Mr. Grayson had asked, sounding desperate. Marcus didn't hesitate. "Of course, sir," he replied. By the time Marcus started his patrol around the parking lot, the rain had soaked his jacket, and the chilly wind cut through his uniform. Most of the office workers had gone home hours ago, and the area was unusually quiet. As he walked under the dim streetlights, Marcus kept his flashlight in hand, scanning the lot out of habit. That's when he heard it, a muffled sound coming from behind a parked car. It wasn't loud, but it was enough to make him stop in his tracks. He turned off his flashlight to listen more closely. The sound came again, this time clearer. It was a woman's voice, shaky and scared. "Help. Please, someone help me." Marcus's heart quickened. He moved toward the sound, careful not to startle whoever it was. Behind a silver sedan, he saw her, a pregnant woman, soaked from head to toe, clutching her belly with one hand while trying to fend off two men with the other. One of the men was leaning in, demanding her purse, while the other stood watch, glancing nervously around. Marcus didn't think twice. "Hey, what's going on here?" he shouted, his deep voice cutting through the rain. The men froze, clearly not expecting anyone to intervene. Marcus stepped closer, his flashlight now pointed directly at them. "Leave her alone," he said firmly. His tone wasn't loud, but it carried authority. The men exchanged a quick glance before muttering something under their breath and taking off into the rain. Marcus didn't chase them. His priority was the woman. "Are you okay, ma'am?" he asked, kneeling beside her. The woman, Emily, looked up at him with tearful eyes. I think I'm okay. But I need to get to the hospital. My car broke down. And then She stopped, too shaken to continue. Marcus nodded, his calm demeanor helping her steady herself. "Don't worry, you're safe now. I'll make sure you get to the hospital." He gently helped her to her feet, guiding her toward the building where she could stay warm while he figured out how to help her. Little did Marcus know, this act of kindness would change his life forever. As the months went by, Marcus's life continued to change in ways he never could have imagined. The new job with Emily and Jonathan had opened many doors for him. The higher salary allowed his family to move into a better home, and he was able to save for his children's future. But it wasn't just about the material things. It was about the sense of purpose and pride Marcus felt every day when he went to work. He had worked hard, not just for the job itself, but for the trust Emily and Jonathan had placed in him. They had given him an opportunity that most people would only dream of, and he wanted to prove that he was worthy of it. He wasn't just working for a paycheck. He was working for his family, for the chance to make a better life for them, and for the opportunity to give back. One afternoon, as Marcus was finishing up a shift, Emily called him. "Marcus, I need your help with something," she said, her voice serious but friendly. "Of course, what do you need?" Marcus replied, always ready to assist when she called. "There's a young man. His name is Michael. He's been struggling to find a job and is having a hard time getting back on his feet. I know you've been through a lot of challenges yourself, and I thought maybe you could help him. Show him what it takes to get a job and succeed." Marcus paused for a moment, surprised by the request. He had always believed in hard work, but he hadn't expected to be asked to help someone else the way he had been helped. "I'm honored, Emily," Marcus said after a moment. "I'd be happy to help. It's important to me that I give back, just like you've done for me." The next day, Marcus met Michael, a young man in his 20s, at a local cafe. Michael looked tired and frustrated, his eyes filled with uncertainty about the future. Marcus could see the same doubt in his eyes that he had once felt when he was struggling to make ends meet. "Hey, Michael," Marcus said, offering a warm smile. "I know it's tough right now, but you're not alone in this. I've been where you are. Let's talk about how we can turn things around for you." They sat together, talking about Michael's struggles and what he wanted to achieve. Marcus shared his own story, the challenges he had faced, the mistakes he had made, and how he had worked hard to change his life. He explained that the road to success wasn't always easy, but with patience and determination, it was possible. "I know it's not going to happen overnight," Michael said, looking down at his hands, "but I just don't know where to start." Marcus leaned forward, his eyes filled with encouragement. "Start with one step. Set small goals, work hard every day, and you'll see the change. The first step is always the hardest, but once you take it, everything else will fall into place." Over the next few weeks, Marcus worked with Michael, helping him improve his resume, practice interviews, and find job opportunities. It wasn't easy, but Marcus could see Michael starting to gain confidence. One afternoon, Marcus received a phone call. It was Michael. "Marcus, I did it. I got the job," Michael exclaimed, his voice full of excitement. Marcus smiled, feeling proud. "I knew you could do it, Michael. You just had to believe in yourself." When Marcus hung up the phone, he sat back and thought about everything that had happened over the past few months. He had received so much kindness from Emily and Jonathan, and now he was paying it forward. Helping someone else succeed, just as he had, felt like the right thing to do. Marcus had learned that sometimes the most important thing you could give wasn't money or material possessions. It was your time, your advice, and your support. By sharing what he had learned, he was making a difference, one step at a time. As he looked out the window, Marcus smiled to himself. He knew that the journey he had started wasn't over. There would always be challenges, but he was ready for whatever came next. He had learned that kindness was powerful, and that paying it forward was the best way to keep the cycle of generosity going. The drive to the hospital felt like it took forever, even though it was only a short distance away. Marcus kept his eyes on the road, but he couldn't help but glance over at Emily every now and then. She was pale, her hands still clutching her stomach, and she looked like she was fighting the urge to panic. "Just breathe," Marcus said calmly, noticing how fast she was breathing. "Slow and steady. You're doing great." Emily nodded, trying her best to follow his advice. "I'm just scared," she admitted softly. "I didn't think I'd go into labor this early." Marcus understood. He had never been through something like this, but he had a sense of what it felt like to be in an emergency. He was no doctor, but he could tell Emily needed to stay as calm as possible. He tried to focus on driving, blocking out the stormy weather and the worried thoughts swirling in his own mind. "Everything's going to be okay," Marcus said, more to himself than to her. He hoped she could hear the confidence in his voice. The hospital was finally in sight, the bright lights shining through the rain. Marcus pulled into the emergency entrance, immediately parking in the designated area. He quickly got out of the car and rushed to open the door for Emily. "Let's get you inside," he said gently, offering his hand to help her out. Emily nodded, her face strained but still trusting Marcus. With his help, she slowly got out of the car, her steps shaky. Marcus stayed close by, making sure she didn't stumble. Inside the hospital, Marcus quickly found a nurse and explained the situation. The nurse's eyes widened with concern when she heard about Emily's early contractions. "We'll take it from here," the nurse said, her voice calm but firm. "Let's get you to a room right away, ma'am." Marcus watched as the nurse led Emily down the hall. He wanted to stay with her, but he knew there were people here who could take better care of her. Still, he couldn't shake the feeling that he needed to make sure she was all right. "Ma'am, do you need anything?" Marcus asked Emily, following them down the hallway. Emily turned to look at him, her face softening. "I'm all right now, Marcus," she said, her voice quiet. "You've done more than enough. I can't thank you enough for everything." Marcus gave a reassuring smile, trying to hide the knot that had formed in his stomach. "I'm just glad I could help. I'll be right here if you need anything." Once they reached the room, Marcus hesitated at the door. Emily smiled at him one last time. "Thank you again," she said, her eyes filled with gratitude. Marcus gave a small nod and quietly stepped back. He wasn't going to leave her side completely, but he knew she was in good hands now. Sitting down in the waiting area, Marcus took a deep breath, finally allowing himself a moment to relax. The adrenaline that had been pumping through his veins all night was starting to fade, but his mind was still racing. He sat back, watching the clock as the minutes ticked by. Despite everything that had happened, he couldn't help but feel a sense of pride. He had done something good tonight, and for the first time in a while, Marcus felt like he had made a real difference. Little did he know, this was only the beginning of a much bigger change in his life. Marcus sat in the waiting area, his eyes fixed on the hospital door as time passed by slowly. The rain outside showed no sign of letting up, and the sound of water hitting the windows created a soft, calming rhythm. But inside, his mind was racing. He thought about the events of the night, the way he'd come across Emily in the parking lot, how he'd felt a sense of urgency to protect her, and the drive to the hospital. The adrenaline was still in his veins, making it hard to focus on anything else. As much as Marcus had been worried about Emily, there was one thing that brought him comfort. She was in good hands now. The hospital staff had taken charge, and Marcus knew they would do everything they could to help her and her baby. It had been a long night, and he was starting to feel the weight of the hours catching up with him. Just as he started to close his eyes for a moment of rest, the door to the emergency room opened, and the nurse he had spoken to earlier stepped out. "Mr. Jenkins," she called, her voice warm and reassuring. Marcus stood up immediately, his heart racing again. "How is she? Is everything all right?" The nurse smiled kindly. "She's doing well. We've got her settled in, and the doctors are keeping an eye on her. She's not in labor yet, but we'll monitor her for the next few hours." Marcus breathed a sigh of relief. "Thank you," he said, his voice low. The nurse nodded. "She asked about you. She's very grateful for what you did tonight. She said she doesn't know what would have happened without you." Marcus smiled softly, his heart swelling at her words. It wasn't about the praise for him. It was about knowing that he had helped someone in need. "Can I see her?" Marcus asked, his eyes hopeful. The nurse hesitated for a moment before answering. "She's resting now, but if you want, I can let you speak to her for a moment. It might help calm her." Marcus nodded quickly. "I'd appreciate that." The nurse led him down the hallway, past several rooms, until they reached Emily's. He could see the soft glow of the lights inside and the faint sounds of quiet conversation. When the door opened, Emily looked up and smiled weakly at Marcus. "Hey there," she said softly, her voice still a little shaky. "How are you feeling?" Marcus asked as he stepped into the room, his concern obvious. "I'm okay," Emily replied, her eyes tired but filled with gratitude. "I was scared, but I feel a lot better now. The doctors say everything is going to be all right." Marcus let out a relieved sigh. "That's good to hear. I'm glad you're safe." Emily's eyes softened, and she reached out for his hand. "You saved me tonight. I can't even explain how much that means to me." Marcus gently took her hand, his heart warming at her words. "I just did what anyone would do in that situation. You don't have to thank me." Emily smiled, but there was a hint of something more in her gaze, a deep sense of appreciation and something else he couldn't quite place. "Still," she said softly, "you did more than just help me. You made sure I was okay, even when everything seemed impossible. I won't forget that." Marcus stood there for a moment, unsure of what to say. "I'm just glad I could be there when you needed help." Emily nodded, her eyes closing for a second as she let out a quiet sigh of relief. "Thank you, Marcus. I'll never be able to repay you, but I'll always remember what you did." Marcus smiled, giving her hand a gentle squeeze. "You don't have to repay me. Just take care of yourself and take care of that baby." With that, Marcus quietly stepped back, allowing Emily to rest. As he walked out of the room, he couldn't shake the feeling that his life was about to change in ways he could never have imagined. The next morning, Marcus woke up early, as usual. The rain had finally stopped, and the sky outside his small apartment window was a mix of gray and blue. It looked like the weather was calming down, but inside Marcus, his thoughts were still racing. He thought about Emily, about the way she'd thanked him for helping her the night before. He felt a sense of pride, but also a bit of confusion. After all, what he had done wasn't anything extraordinary. It was just helping someone in need. But the way she had looked at him, the gratitude in her eyes, it made him wonder if there was more to the story. Marcus went through his usual morning routine. He made a pot of coffee, ate a quick breakfast, and dressed for work. He was about to head out the door when he paused. There, parked right in front of his house, was a sleek, shiny black Mercedes-Benz. His eyes widened in surprise. The car was clearly expensive, and it was out of place on his quiet street. He rubbed his eyes, thinking he was still half asleep. But no, the car was still there. It sat perfectly in the parking spot, gleaming under the early morning light. Marcus stepped outside cautiously, his shoes tapping against the pavement as he walked toward the car. It was beautiful, far beyond anything he could ever afford. He stood there for a moment, confused. Why was it here? Was it a mistake? He noticed a note tucked under the windshield wiper. The note was handwritten, the words written in neat, elegant handwriting. For Marcus. A small token of gratitude for saving 2 lives last night. Emily. Marcus blinked. His heart skipped a beat. He had never expected anything in return for what he did, especially not something like this. He slowly unfolded the note and read it again, just to make sure it was real. The gift was from Emily. The Mercedes was hers. It was clear now that the night had meant more to her than he had realized. But was this too much? Was it even appropriate to accept a gift like this? Marcus wasn't sure what to do. As he stood there, lost in thought, he heard the sound of footsteps behind him. He turned around to see Emily walking toward him, her husband Jonathan right behind her. "Good morning, Marcus," Emily said with a warm smile. "I hope you're doing all right." Marcus smiled back, but couldn't hide the confusion on his face. "I'm doing well, but I don't understand. What's this?" Jonathan, Emily's husband, stepped forward, offering his hand to Marcus. "We wanted to thank you for everything you did last night. Our family will never be able to express enough gratitude. Emily insisted on giving you something. This car is just a small token of our appreciation." Marcus's eyes widened. "But I can't accept this." He shook his head quickly. "It's too much." Jonathan chuckled. "It's not too much, Marcus. You saved our family. If anyone deserves it, it's you." Emily stepped closer, her eyes soft and sincere. "Please, Marcus. You saved not just me, but my babies as well. We want you to know how much you mean to us." Marcus looked down at the car, his mind still spinning. He wasn't used to being treated like this. It wasn't about the car. It was about the gesture, the kindness they were showing him. "Are you sure?" Marcus asked, his voice full of doubt. Jonathan smiled again. "We are sure. We want to repay you in whatever way we can. Please take it, Marcus." With a heavy sigh, Marcus finally nodded. "All right, I'll take it, but only because you insist." Emily smiled warmly. "Thank you, Marcus. You'll never regret this." As Marcus stood there, staring at the car, a part of him felt like his life was about to change forever. He had done one good deed, and now everything was different. The following day, Marcus couldn't shake the feeling that something big was changing in his life. The shiny Mercedes-Benz in his driveway was still a mystery to him, but he couldn't ignore the gratitude Emily and her husband, Jonathan, had shown him. It wasn't just about the car. It was everything. The kindness, the attention, the way they made him feel like he had truly made a difference. After spending the morning thinking over everything, Marcus was about to head out to work when the sound of a car pulling up outside caught his attention. He stepped to the window, and there it was, the Mercedes. But this time, it wasn't just parked there. Emily and Jonathan were getting out of the car. Marcus felt a small knot form in his stomach. He wasn't sure what to expect. Was this another gesture of thanks? Or was there something more they wanted to say? When they reached his door, Marcus opened it to greet them. Emily was smiling, and Jonathan had a calm but serious expression on his face. "Hey there, Marcus," Emily said brightly. "I hope you're doing all right with the car. I know it's a bit much, but we wanted to make sure you knew how much we appreciated what you did for me." Marcus smiled nervously. "I'm doing fine, Emily. I'm not used to all of this. It's a lot to take in." Jonathan stepped forward, offering a firm handshake. "We understand, Marcus. But you need to know that what you did for Emily and our family, it wasn't just a small favor. You saved lives that night. You gave us a future. We couldn't just let you walk away without showing how much we care." Marcus swallowed, trying to find the right words. I really didn't expect anything like this. It was just the right thing to do." You don't have to do this. Emily placed a hand on his shoulder. I know, Marcus, and we respect that. But we've been thinking a lot about what we can do to repay you. It's not just the car. It's everything. We want to help you. At that moment, Marcus felt like his world was shifting in ways he couldn't understand. People didn't do things like this. People didn't go out of their way to help others in such big ways. But Emily and Jonathan had. They had shown him more kindness than he could have ever imagined. Repay me? How? Marcus asked, unsure of what they meant. Jonathan smiled, a twinkle in his eye. We're actually in need of someone to manage security for a few of our properties. Emily and I have been talking, and we think you'd be perfect for the job. You already have the experience, and we could offer you a much higher salary. It's a real opportunity for you, Marcus. We want to give you a future, one that's better than what you've got now. Marcus was speechless. He had always been proud of the work he did, but the idea of a bigger job with more responsibility was something he had never dreamed of. I don't know what to say, Marcus stammered. This is a lot. Emily stepped closer, her eyes sincere. You've earned it, Marcus. You've earned our trust and respect. Please, think about it. We want to help you, not just because of what you did for us, but because we believe in you. Marcus took a deep breath, feeling overwhelmed. This was a huge decision, but it felt like an opportunity he couldn't ignore. Let me think about it, he said, finally finding his voice. I need some time to process everything. Jonathan nodded. Of course, take all the time you need. We just want you to know that the offer stands. As they turned to leave, Emily gave Marcus a reassuring smile. We're here for you, Marcus, no matter what you decide. As the sound of their car faded down the street, Marcus stood there, feeling like he was standing at the edge of a new life. This was more than just a gift or a job offer. It was a chance for something better. And Marcus couldn't help but feel that it was exactly what he needed. A few months had passed since Marcus accepted the job offer from Emily and Jonathan. The transition to his new role hadn't been easy, but it had been rewarding. The work was different from what he was used to, and there were new challenges every day. But Marcus was rising to meet them. He had started managing security for several of Jonathan's properties, ensuring everything was running smoothly. The job paid much more than his old one, but it wasn't just about the money. It was about the opportunity to grow. Marcus had learned new skills, met new people, and had a chance to prove to himself that he could do more than he ever thought possible. One of the most important things that had changed was how he viewed himself. When he had first accepted the job, he had been unsure, even afraid. But now Marcus felt more confident in his abilities. He had gone from just doing his job to really owning it. His responsibilities had grown, and he had earned the respect of his colleagues and superiors. He had also become close with Jonathan and Emily. They weren't just employers, they were friends. Every time Marcus saw them, they treated him with kindness and respect, always checking in on how he was doing. Emily, especially, made it a point to remind him how much he had helped them, how much they appreciated everything he had done. One day, as Marcus was leaving work, Jonathan stopped him in the hallway. Marcus, I just wanted to take a moment to say thank you, Jonathan said, his voice filled with sincerity. You've done more than we could have asked for, not just in your work, but in the way you've become part of our team. You're exactly what we needed. Marcus smiled, grateful for the praise. I'm just doing my job, Jonathan. I'm happy to help in any way I can. But Jonathan shook his head. No, Marcus. You're more than just an employee to us. You've shown us what it means to be truly dedicated, and we want to make sure you know how much we value you. Later that evening, Emily called Marcus to check in. Hey, Marcus. I hope everything's going well, she said cheerfully. Everything's good, Marcus replied, smiling. The work's been busy, but I'm managing. Emily paused for a moment before speaking again. I just want to remind you how thankful we are for everything you've done. You've changed our lives, Marcus. You really have. I can't say it enough. Hearing those words filled Marcus with warmth. It was more than just the car or the higher salary. What really mattered to him was how Emily and Jonathan treated him. They saw him as a person, not just someone who could do a job. They valued his contributions, not just for the work he did, but for the person he was. Marcus thought about how far he had come in such a short time. Just a few months ago, he had been unsure of himself, struggling to decide whether to accept a life-changing opportunity. Now he was thriving, and it felt like everything was falling into place. As he sat down with his family that night, Marcus couldn't help but feel a deep sense of gratitude. His life had changed in ways he hadn't expected, but all of it had been for the better. The kindness of Emily and Jonathan had opened doors he never thought possible, and in return, he had worked hard to make the most of the opportunities they had given him. "I'm proud of you, Marcus," Sheila said, her voice full of love and support. "I'm proud of us," Marcus replied. "This is just the beginning." As he looked around at his family, Marcus realized that no matter where life took him next, he would always remember the lesson he had learned. Kindness and gratitude could change everything.